Today's a solo episode. My name is Jack McLean, and I'll be discussing how gymnastics centers can help your explosive training, particularly around our power based slow stretch shortening cycle work and our fast short stretching cycle work. So your plyometrics. There's different floor surfaces, and I've been lucky enough to use this both from a performance point of view, but also with longer term injuries like ACL return to play, both in the NRL and AFL. So I'll just share my experience over the last couple of years using these centres. Obviously, it's a very traditional sport, and perhaps parents listening in, your kids participate in gymnastics, so you'll be familiar with the environment. For those that haven't been in a gymnastics centre, like myself, I never did gymnastics growing up. So I've experienced it through professionally, but also with my son and daughter doing gymnastics. It's more of just been a recent exposure to it over the last few years. But I think it adds a lot of value to AFL and team field-based athletes, particularly those that want to be more explosive. Obviously, the game's only getting faster, and the game is incredibly demanding on our plyometric ability, your ability to generate force really fast and reflexively in multi-directional planes. And we need to be able to do this to help us create space when we've got the ball so we can execute our skills at a really high level, but equally to put pressure on our opponents by pressing them and taking space away from them, so we can obviously get the ball, but also affect their ability to execute their skills by putting pressure. So it's going to help you from an attack as well as a defensive point of view. But we'll get into, I guess, where it all starts. So what we're looking to develop. So from a capacity point of view, how high you can jump. Gymnastic centers can definitely aid in that type of training. From a capacity point of view, it can help in our ability to be able to step on a dime. So a deceleration ability, our ability to change direction on one limb. So like a power cut, our ability to maneuver like a drop step, and also our ability to be able to project horizontally as well. So not just vertically, jumping as high as you can, but out in front. So if you can increase the distance that you get with your first three steps, for example, so aiding in acceleration. Because the floor is a little bit more friendly on the joints, using the long tramp, using the rectangle tramp, using the sprung floor, we're able to get more reps in. So not only does that help with our developing robustness and more conditioned tendons and muscles and bones, but it also helps from a coaching perspective to be able to develop good efficiency, good movement competency. So we can challenge the athlete simply by just getting more reps in, and that helps us accelerate their development from an athletic point of view. And on a other note as well, you can bring a skills coach in and you can work on some worst case scenario positions that athletes get into. So for NRL, a lot of the wingers will be in an outstretched position for a try. So we can work on tumbling. We can work on, for AFL footballers, a lot of perturbation work and affecting their body in space when they're in the air, and being able to work on their landing mechanics to help not only be able to keep their feet in the game, but also to reduce risks of ACL or ankle-based rolled ankle injuries. So great for performance from an athlete point of view, but also great for reducing the risk of injury and also long-term athletic development. The four different floors that I've used more regularly: the long tramp, which you can use for a great way to warm up and get the athletes prepped for the session. It's also a great way to be able to work on some of those spins and different multi-directional type jumps. You can also get at the end of the session some good capacity work, so working on building up that lactate, bit of metabolic work on the legs and developing muscular endurance and pre-fatigue. So for like those ACL athletes, we could do that once the athlete really understands what success feels like and they've got a good grasp of their movements. We might do some long tramp repeat skater jumps, for example, or tuck jumps, put some pre-fatigue into the system, and then get them to execute those powerful tasks to help mimic a 3/4 or 4th quarter fatigue in the legs, for example, but also just to challenge their brain with their body under fatigue. The air mat, which is more common at football clubs these days, around 10 to 15 meters long. Great way to intro drilling for those that haven't maybe had a lower limb injury and they haven't been able to do any running-based work for a while. It's also a good way at the gymnastics to just bring in some jumps and prep on a softer surface. Our sprung floor, which is really good from our performance point of view, particularly around our intensive accels. So if we're doing more extensive compliant work on the tramp and on the air mat, the sprung floor is there to be able to give us obviously a bit more spring, and the athletes feel really light and powerful when they're on the sprung floor. So that's a great one for things like bounding, both forward bounds, vertical, Bozov hops, tuck jumps, crossover bounds. So you can get all those different types of north, south, east, west hops. You can create circuits on there, which I've done before. So coming off a tramp, going over a couple of hurdles, and then doing a power cut into a decel stick. You can add in both your lateral work, your vertical work, and your horizontal work on the sprung floor. And athletes are going to be able to generate force really quickly. So it really helps their ability to be able to use their tendons on the sprung floor. And then we've just got large space, and that's where it's great to involve the coaches, bring the footballers in and work on landing mechanics, tumbling, so that, prevent shoulder injuries, wrist injuries, elbows injuries, and challenge the athletes with the football and, working on not just tumbling, but you could also work on some fend-off work, some footwork efficiency, change of direction, and so forth. As I mentioned, on-field benefits, which is what it's all about whenever we're using these methods. So ultimately, like I said, the game's only getting faster, so we need to be able to train both physically faster and think faster. So that's where this reflexive type training, this special strength training, can really aid our strength power program in the gym. And ultimately, all this type of high intensity actions helps us create space or take space away from the opponents. I also touched on, from a conditioning point of view, if we're going to do high intensity speed drills in football training, then this could be a good thing to do pre-Christmas or even in the off season to help develop tendon, ligament robustness and resilience. So you're in a better place for those small-sided games and match play drills. So perhaps you could also do it as a development for robustness sequence. And I've had good success, like I said, with a couple of ACLation, or commonly like Jake Melksham, AFL. He played quite a demanding game in terms of high intensity, both from a contest point of view as well as aerially. Had a good ability to be able to take pack marks and beat his opponent one-on-one. So agility and footwork were really important to him for his return to performance, and he found he took a lot of confidence out of using the gymnastic center for his knee, but also for his football as well. So it was a good block of work for about 6 weeks, two times a week in his program just before he was full training with the squad. So that can be a good opportunity to use it there when their athlete's really ready for that return to performance. I've also used it in small groups. At the Paramount Eels last year, we had a group of about 10 athletes, all that wanted to work on their speed and footwork. So they identified that was an area that was a growth area that they wanted to work to help their game. And we had 2 gymnastics sessions a week, one for those that were just returning for injury. So a few injured guys, MCL injuries, ACL injuries. And then they also joined with the performance group. So that 10 that just weren't injured, but just wanted to work on their footwork and running speed. So that was great to be able to see, and subjectively those athletes felt that it helped with their acceleration and helped with their change of direction, which is really important for the sport like rugby, where you want to try and create separation from the defensive line. From a scheduling point of view, best time, because it is quite high demand on the tendons. So particularly take into account those that have got Achilles and patellar tendinopathy in your drill selection, which I'll share my screen in a second and show a framework that Selwyn Griffith has shared with me from the Melbourne Demons, which has been a good process to follow. Give you a bit of an idea on how to level and tier your progressions and regressions. But typically I would program and schedule this in at the footy club, a day where they have a day off the next day. So maybe they've got a field session around that 10 a.m. and you might do it in the afternoon as part of their rotations with their gym and meetings. Last little bit to wrap up the episode, I'll just share my screen. So if you're listening to the podcast, make sure to head over to our YouTube channel. So we've got 3 different tabs here on the Excel spreadsheet. So we've got 5 different levels, going from basic development, where we're working on awareness and body awareness. So things like running mechanics, arabesques, quick feet ladder work, some just general skipping, and then progressing them towards your stock standard jumps and broad jumps and slalom jumps, where you're jumping in different planes using that lateral vector. As we progress on, we're starting to add a bit more chaos into the system. So getting them to reflex using perturbation. So when they're jumping, they might be hit in the air, or you might push them in the air, work on their landing mechanics with that perturbation to mimic the game. You might get them to spin. You might put circuits together, like I said, to get a mixture of all the different vectors, vertical, horizontal, lateral. Use constraints like hurdles, aqua bags, bands to challenge their trunk lateral flexion. So we just want to add a fair bit of complexity as they get more competent and more used to the environment. Typically going from double leg tasks to single leg tasks, to isolated movements where you're working on maybe a particular joint, like pogos. You might be working on the knee and hips. They're static, and you're just working on the ankle stiffness and that foot and ground interaction. And then as you get along, it's about how the ankle, knee, and hip work together and challenging the trunk. So that's for the sprung floor. Then the rectangle tramp, we typically would use that for a lot of the landing mechanics work and adding that into the circuit. And you can see the different drills and progressions that athletes would go through there. And then, like I mentioned, the long tramps, where we get some, might use it for warm-up and introducing new movements because it's quite safe at the start of the session. And then perhaps some capacity-based work at the end, where on command you're getting the athlete to stick. And that's where you might throw in some football components to it as well, to work on their cognitive ability as well and challenge their brain. So that's in terms of drill database. And then in terms of gymnastics, visual, you can look at the 4 different sections here. Another way of visualizing it, of your progressions. Like I said, going from more extensive running mechanic drills to progressing them from double leg to progressing them to multi-plane, single leg intensive drills. Going from controlled, progressing through to reactive. And then the different modes that we can use: long tramp, sprung floor, and acrobat. That's it for this week's episode of our monthly update. Hopefully some footballers tuned in will check out some gymnastic centres. There's usually one nearby. Make sure to perhaps reach out to your athletes that you play football with and see if you could get like a group booking with your strength and conditioning coach. If you don't have one, reach out to a gymnastic centre and see if they've got any adult classes, which I know is quite common for general population to learn the basics of gymnastics. And then you could add in some of those drills at the end of that session or before the session. Thanks for tuning in, guys. I'll look forward to seeing you on the next episode.